The sun rose over the small, dusty town of Willow Creek, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement of Main Street. Martha Grayson, a woman in her late 50s with calloused hands and tired eyes, stood outside the local bank, clutching a worn leather folder. Her heart pounded as she stared at the imposing glass doors. This was the day she had dreaded for months, returning to claim what she believed was rightfully hers. Inside, the air was cool and sterile, a stark contrast to the warmth of the farm she called home. Martha approached the counter where a young clerk with an indifferent smile greeted her. "Good morning, ma'am. How may I assist you?" he asked, his tone polite but distant. "I'm here about my late husband's account," Martha said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. She placed the folder on the counter and opened it, revealing faded documents and a handwritten will. "This proves that the farm and the funds tied to it are mine." The clerk glanced at the papers, his expression shifting from curiosity to skepticism. "I'll need to verify this with our manager," he said, taking the documents and disappearing into a back office. Martha waited, her fingers tapping nervously on the counter. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours before a tall, impeccably dressed man emerged. His nameplate read Richard Hargrove, branch manager. "Mrs. Grayson," Richard began, his tone condescending, "while these documents are interesting, they don't hold up legally. Your husband's estate was absorbed by the bank due to outstanding debts. I'm afraid there's nothing we can do." Martha's face flushed with anger. "That's impossible. My husband paid off every cent before he passed. These papers prove it." Richard smirked, glancing at his colleagues who were now watching the scene unfold. "Perhaps you should have hired a lawyer instead of relying on scraps of paper," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. A ripple of laughter spread through the room, and Martha felt the weight of their judgment pressing down on her. Humiliated but determined, Martha left the bank with a fire burning in her chest. As she drove back to her farm, she replayed the conversation in her mind. She knew the truth, but without proper evidence, no one would believe her. Her thoughts turned to her son, Ethan, who had moved to the city years ago to pursue a career in law. He was her only hope. Later that evening, sitting at the kitchen table under the dim glow of a single bulb, Martha dialed Ethan's number. The phone rang several times before his familiar voice answered. "Mom, is everything okay?" "Ethan, I need your help," she said, her voice trembling. "They're trying to take the farm. I don't know what to do anymore." There was a pause on the other end. "I'll be there as soon as I can," Ethan replied, his tone resolute. "We'll figure this out together." 2 days later, Ethan arrived at the farm, tall and broad-shouldered, with sharp features and piercing blue eyes. He carried an air of confidence that made even strangers take notice. After hugging his mother tightly, he sat down to review the documents she had shown the bank. "These are solid," Ethan said after examining them carefully. "But they're missing something crucial, a certified copy of the final payment receipt. Without that, the bank has leverage." Martha sighed heavily. "Your father kept everything so meticulously. If it exists, it's here somewhere." For the next few days, mother and son scoured the house, searching through boxes of old records and photographs. They uncovered memories long forgotten. A photograph of Ethan as a child playing in the fields, letters exchanged between Martha and her late husband during his military service, but no receipt. One afternoon, while rummaging through the attic, Ethan stumbled upon a locked metal box hidden beneath a pile of blankets. Using a screwdriver, he pried it open to reveal stacks of neatly organized papers. Among them was a yellowed envelope labeled "Final Payment Receipt." Ethan's eyes widened as he pulled it out. "Mom, I think we found it." Martha rushed to his side, tears streaming down her face as she held the document. "This is it, Ethan. This is all we need." Armed with the receipt, they returned to the bank, ready to confront Richard once more. But as they stepped inside, they noticed an unusual tension in the air. Employees whispered urgently among themselves, and Richard's usual smug demeanor seemed shaken. When they approached him, Richard's face paled as he saw the receipt. "Where did you get that?" he demanded, his voice barely above a whisper. "It doesn't matter where we got it," Ethan replied firmly. "What matters is that it proves my mother's claim. Now, are you going to honor it, or do we need to escalate this further?" Richard hesitated, glancing around nervously. Finally, he nodded. "Fine. We'll process the transfer immediately." As they walked out of the bank, victory swelling in their hearts, neither Martha nor Ethan noticed the shadowy figure watching them from across the street. A man with cold, calculating eyes who seemed far too interested in their success. The shadowy figure across the street watched Martha and Ethan leave the bank with a mixture of curiosity and malice. His name was Victor Langston, a former business partner of Martha's late husband, Thomas Grayson. Years ago, Victor had been embroiled in a bitter legal battle with Thomas over disputed land rights near Willow Creek. Though Thomas had emerged victorious, Victor harbored a deep grudge, one that had festered into something far more sinister over time. Victor adjusted his coat and slipped into a nearby cafe, where he dialed a number on his phone. "They found the receipt," he muttered into the receiver. "We need to act fast before they dig any deeper." The voice on the other end replied tersely, and Victor nodded, though no one could see him. He hung up and stared out the window, his mind racing. For years, he had manipulated debts and forged documents to slowly gain control of properties once owned by Thomas. Losing the farm now would unravel everything he had worked for. Back at the farm, Martha and Ethan celebrated their small victory with tea and toast at the kitchen table. Despite the triumph, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. "Mom, did Dad ever mention anyone who might have had a vendetta against him?" he asked, leaning forward. Martha hesitated, her brow furrowing as she thought back. "There was Victor Langston," she said finally. "He used to be a friend, more like an acquaintance, really. But they had a falling out years ago. I never knew the full details, but your father always said Victor was dangerous." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Do you think he could be involved somehow? This whole situation feels off." Before Martha could respond, there was a knock at the door. Ethan rose to answer it, finding a courier holding a thick envelope. "For Mrs. Grayson," the man said curtly before leaving without another word. Inside the envelope were copies of financial records, transactions, transfers, and forged signatures, all linking the farm's supposed debts to shell companies owned by none other than Victor Langston. "This is blackmail material," Ethan whispered, flipping through the pages. "Someone wants us to know what's been going on." Martha's hands trembled as she read the documents. "But why send this to us? What do they want?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Whoever sent this is trying to expose Victor, but they're not doing it openly. They're using us as pawns." That night, unable to sleep, Ethan sat at the kitchen table reviewing the documents again. The pieces fit together too perfectly. It was almost as if someone wanted them to take action. But who? And why now? As he pondered, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me tomorrow at dawn. Come alone. Bring the papers." Ethan stared at the message, his heart pounding. Whoever this was, they clearly knew more than they were letting on. He debated telling Martha, but decided against it. She had already been through enough. Instead, he resolved to go alone and uncover the truth. At sunrise, Ethan parked his car near the edge of the woods outside town, as instructed. A hooded figure emerged from the shadows, keeping their face hidden. "You came," the figure said, their voice low and cautious. "Who are you?" Ethan demanded, gripping the envelope tightly. "My name doesn't matter," the figure replied. "What matters is that Victor Langston has been stealing from people like your mother for years. He's powerful, connected, and ruthless. If you try to take him down directly, you'll lose everything." Ethan frowned. "Then why give us these documents? Why help us at all?" "Because I owe your father," the figure admitted after a pause. "He saved my life once, long ago. Now it's my turn to repay the favor. Use these wisely, but be careful. Victor won't stop until he gets what he wants." With that, the figure disappeared into the trees, leaving Ethan alone with more questions than answers. When he returned home, He shared the encounter with Martha, who listened intently. "We can't let him get away with this," she said firmly. "Your father built this farm with his own 2 hands. It's our legacy." Ethan nodded, though doubt lingered in his mind. Taking on someone like Victor wouldn't be easy, especially without hard evidence beyond the documents they'd received. Still, they began formulating a plan. Over the next few days, Ethan reached out to old contacts from his law firm, discreetly gathering information about Victor's operations. Meanwhile, Martha visited friends and neighbors, piecing together fragments of rumors and whispers about Victor's shady dealings. Slowly, a clearer picture began to emerge. Victor wasn't just targeting their family, he was exploiting countless others in similar ways. One evening, as they discussed their findings, a loud crash echoed from outside. Rushing to the window, they saw flames engulfing the barn. Panic surged through Martha as she grabbed a bucket and ran toward the inferno. Ethan followed, shouting for her to stay back, but it was too late. The fire spread rapidly, consuming everything in its path. As firefighters arrived to contain the blaze, Ethan noticed tire tracks leading away from the property. Someone had set the fire intentionally. Standing amidst the chaos, Martha turned to Ethan, her eyes filled with determination. "This isn't just about the farm anymore," she said. "It's about justice. For your father, for us, and for everyone else Victor has hurt." The charred remains of the barn stood as a grim reminder of Victor Langston's reach. The fire had not only destroyed years of hard work, but also sent a chilling message: back down or lose everything. Yet, instead of cowering, Martha and Ethan found themselves more determined than ever. They knew they were playing a dangerous game, one where the stakes grew higher with each passing day. Ethan spent hours poring over the documents provided by the mysterious informant, cross-referencing them with public records and financial statements he obtained through his contacts in the city. Each piece of evidence painted a clearer picture of Victor's empire, an intricate web of shell companies, forged signatures, and illegal land acquisitions. But proving it would require more than just paperwork. They needed witnesses willing to testify against him. Martha, meanwhile, turned to the community for support. She visited neighbors who had once been close friends with her late husband, sharing what she had uncovered about Victor's schemes. At first, many were reluctant to speak out, fearing retaliation. But when she revealed the extent of his crimes, not just against her family but against others in the town, some began to open up. One such neighbor was Frank Delaney, an elderly man whose small farm had been seized under dubious circumstances years earlier. "I always suspected something wasn't right," Frank admitted, his voice trembling with anger. "But I didn't have the means or the courage to fight back." With Frank's testimony and others like it, Ethan felt they might finally have enough to build a case strong enough to bring Victor down. However, they still lacked one crucial element: direct proof linking Victor to the arson at their farm. Without it, any accusations could easily be dismissed as hearsay. Determined to find answers, Ethan decided to take a risk. Under the cover of darkness, he drove to Victor's sprawling estate on the outskirts of Willow Creek. The mansion loomed like a fortress, its windows dark except for a single light glowing faintly from an upstairs room. Sneaking around the perimeter, Ethan spotted a security camera mounted near the gate. He disabled it quickly, knowing time was of the essence. Inside the house, Victor sat in his study, nursing a glass of whiskey. His expression was calm, almost smug, as if he already knew Ethan was lurking nearby. Suddenly, a soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Sir, there's someone here claiming to have information about the Grayson case," his assistant announced nervously. Victor raised an eyebrow. "Send them in." A moment later, the same hooded figure who had met Ethan in the woods entered the room. Pulling back their hood, they revealed themselves to be Rachel Monroe, a former employee of Victor's who had fled after discovering his illicit activities. "You've made a mistake, Victor," she said coldly. "You burned the wrong barn." Victor chuckled, unfazed. And you've made a bigger one by coming here. Do you really think I'll let you walk away? Rachel smirked, holding up a USB drive. This contains every transaction, every forged document, every bribe you've ever paid. If anything happens to me, it goes straight to the authorities and the press. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Victor's face. Before he could respond, chaos erupted outside. Ethan, having planted small recording devices throughout the property, triggered alarms that caused pandemonium among Victor's security team. Lights flashed, dogs barked, and guards scrambled to secure the premises. Seizing the opportunity, Rachel slipped out a side door, meeting Ethan in the shadows. Together, they fled into the night, clutching the USB drive that held the key to exposing Victor's empire. Back at the farm, Martha awaited their return with bated breath. When Ethan and Rachel arrived, exhausted but triumphant, they wasted no time uploading the contents of the drive onto multiple secure servers. By morning, the evidence was in the hands of journalists, lawyers, and law enforcement agencies across the state. As news of Victor's crimes spread, shockwaves rippled through Willow Creek. People who had once feared him now spoke openly about his abuses of power. Arrest warrants were issued, and within days, Victor Langston was taken into custody. His reign of corruption brought to an abrupt end. Yet even as justice seemed within reach, Martha couldn't shake the feeling that this victory came at a cost. The farm, though saved, bore scars that would take years to heal. And while Ethan had returned home to help her, she wondered how long he would stay before the call of his city life pulled him away again. "We did it," Ethan said softly, standing beside her as they surveyed the damaged fields. "But at what price?" Martha placed a hand on his shoulder. "Your father always said that fighting for what's right is never easy, but it's worth it." The aftermath of Victor Langston's arrest swept through Willow Creek like a storm, leaving both destruction and renewal in its wake. For Martha Grayson, the vindication was bittersweet. The farm, though legally hers once more, bore the scars of fire and betrayal. Yet amidst the ashes, something unexpected began to take root: hope. Ethan stayed on at the farm longer than he had initially planned, helping Martha rebuild what had been lost. Together, they cleared the charred remains of the barn and began constructing a new one. It wasn't just about rebuilding structures. It was about healing wounds that ran deeper than wood and steel. As they worked side by side, their bond grew stronger, bridging the years of distance that had once separated them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the fields, Ethan paused to wipe the sweat from his brow. "Mom," he said hesitantly, "what happens now? I mean, for you and for me." Martha looked up from her work, her expression thoughtful. "I've spent my life tied to this land, Ethan. It's shaped who I am. But maybe it's time I let go a little. You've given me back so much, my home, my dignity. Maybe it's your turn to find what makes you whole." Ethan frowned, unsure of how to respond. He had always seen himself as a city person, someone who thrived in the fast-paced world of law and ambition. But the simplicity of life on the farm, the sense of purpose it gave him, had begun to seep into his soul. "I don't know if I can stay here forever," he admitted, "but I also don't think I'm ready to leave yet." Martha smiled softly. "Then don't rush it. Life has a way of showing us where we belong when we're ready to listen." As weeks turned into months, the community rallied around the Graysons, offering help and support. Neighbors who had once feared speaking out against Victor now came forward, sharing stories of their own struggles and triumphs. The town began to heal, its people united by a newfound courage to stand up for what was right. Rachel Monroe, the whistleblower who had risked everything to expose Victor, became a regular visitor to the farm. She and Ethan developed a tentative friendship, bonded by their shared experience of confronting darkness and emerging stronger. One afternoon, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Rachel turned to him. "You've changed, you know," she said quietly. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Changed how? You used to be so focused on winning at any cost. Now, you seem more grounded, Like you found something worth fighting for beyond yourself. Ethan chuckled, glancing toward the fields where Martha was tending to the crops. Maybe I have. In the months that followed, Ethan made a decision that surprised even himself. He opened a small legal practice in Willow Creek, dedicated to helping those who had been wronged by powerful interests. It wasn't the glamorous career he had envisioned in the city, but it felt meaningful in a way nothing else ever had. For Martha, seeing her son find his place in the world filled her with pride. She knew he would eventually forge his own path, whether it led him back to the city or kept him rooted in Willow Creek. Either way, she was content knowing they had faced their trials together and emerged stronger for it. On the first anniversary of Victor's arrest, the town gathered at the Grayson farm for a celebration. Music played, laughter echoed across the fields, and plates of food were passed around freely. As Martha stood amidst her friends and neighbors, she felt a profound sense of peace. The farm was more than just land. It was a symbol of resilience, of justice served, and of love that endured. Ethan approached her, holding 2 glasses of lemonade. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. Martha clinked her glass against his, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "To family," she replied. "Call to action. If you enjoyed this story of resilience, justice, and the unbreakable bonds of family, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who might appreciate it too. Your support means the world to us. And now I'd love to hear from you. What do you think is the most important lesson Martha and Ethan learned throughout their journey? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.